crazy. I'm crazy.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
This documentary, you ask two basic questions. I mean, they're very simple. What is country music? Where did it come from? Ken?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, first of all, you're drawn to it because it's just an amazing, utterly American story, and that's what we do. But I don't think we could just tell the stories without sort of telling you where it came from and what it is. And what we know is the opposite of what the general conventional wisdom is, that it's not one thing. It's many different types of music.
Julie, answering those two basic questions seems simple, but it had to be absolutely overwhelming when you were doing your research.
Doing the research for this film was overwhelming, but in a positive way. I mean, we just had so much to work with and so many decisions to make. And you know, the way we do our process, we start with our interviews. We don't start with a script. We do our research, but we let the interviews, talking with artists, talking with producers, we let those interviews yield, tell us where the story is going to go. So we're discovering, along with you, what this story is all about. We're not just telling you what we think it should be about.
The key is what Julie was saying before. You have to sort of put yourself into the place to permit those discoveries to take place. If, on the other hand, you research the whole time, and you write the whole time and are willing to rewrite, and you're constantly searching the whole time, you've put yourself in a position to have these sorts of discoveries, to have the Carter family say, yes, I think there's some footage in the garage and it's been in a bag and we haven't looked at it since the 1950s, yes, and then all of a sudden you've been given this incredibly special access to the life of Johnny Cash and his first wife and first family. Among the daughters is Roseanne, who goes on to, you know, follow in her father's footsteps.
You talked about the spread of country music, and Julie, I'll ask you this question. You touch on how important was the Grand Ole Opry and radio to country music?
The Grand Ole Opry was huge in the dissemination of country music, starting really in the 1930s when a lot of people couldn't afford to buy records. You know, records had started being manufactured and sold in the 1920s, but once you hit the Great Depression, it became a problem to buy a record. You know, you're going to buy your food first. And radio was free, and radio was all across the country.
You talk about the roots, and so church songs, ballads, you know, music from minstrels, and think that's the root of country music, and that's sort of where early rock and roll gets its basis too, right?
Elvis Presley's first record is an amazing thing, and he takes a bluesman, a rhythm and bluesman's, Arthur Big Boy Crudup's song, modest hit on R&B stations in Memphis, called That's All Right Mama. And that's the A-side of Elvis's first recording. The B-side is him Elvisizing an old bluegrass tune from Bill Monroe. Not even a bluegrass tune yet, but just Blue Moon of Kentucky. And if you listen to those two things, you can understand instantaneously that what is going to become rock and roll, first it has to go through this sort of middle period of rockabilly. What's going to be called rock and roll is this hybrid of rhythm and blues and country music.
You know, one thing that had a great appeal to me in researching and making this film was understanding the abject poverty that so many country music artists emerge from, and seeing that as we tell the stories of both their biographies but also the songs they wrote, seeing that determination, that talent, that aspiration to move forward. It's a terrific American tale in that way, and you hear it over and over again, whether they were coming up during the Depression or 10 years later or 20 years later. It's that striving, that aspiration combined with incredible talent that's really moving.
Well, is part of that, Ken, the fact that, you mentioned this in the documentary, behind every great country music song is a story.
And there was somebody, this guy in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, heard Loretta Lynn, who was living out here, an early song. He said, "You have the prettiest voice I've ever seen," and paid for her first demo record. which then allowed her to go out with her husband station to station and put it on and get enough notoriety that she'd be invited to Nashville. So you begin to see that all the way along, this human equation is there, and that's really great. You don't find that in any other art form. I mean, people wherever in our film were saying, I just had to pull off the road and cry, or how did she know that's what I was going for? You know, you break up and you're gonna go to be strong and go to a party, and then you see him and everything's upset, you know. All these songs, they are elemental, Three Chords and the Truth, but they are speaking to things that are in our operating system.
I'm thinking tonight.